Hello, and welcome back to Kim Reads as we continue with Phantom. Toward the end of that summer, I found myself relying almost entirely upon Erik's skills. His ambivalent status had already cost me several trained men such as Calandrino, who began to resent his meteoric progress and ultimately declined to work with a boy who had made a mockery of the apprentice system within 2 years. By this time, I was accepting work purely for the sake of Eric's experience. Arthritis was twisting my fingers out of all proportions, and I was where I was soon unable to hold a chisel. I wanted Eric to take over the business from me. During that final contract, I found it easier to employ itinerant laborers, place all the laying under the boy's supervision. I had given him responsibility for every aspect of this new job. He had done all the costings, and though I had gone over the estimate with a fiercely critical eye, I have been unable to pinpoint any naive oversight or extravagance. The client accepted the estimate without demur, and then conveniently departed to Florence for the summer. Consequently, there was no need for him to know that the building of his property had been placed largely in the hands of a 15-year-old boy. The construction proceeded in that orderly manner which characterized all of Eric's work. He had absolute authority in my absence, and his formidable brooding presence upon the site ensured that there was neither nor conflict nor slacking among the men. He was very tall now, massively boned and muscular, almost inhumanly strong, and staggeringly competent. One glance at the uncompromising eyes behind the mask was sufficient to quell anyone's inclination to argue a point, and yet he was always fair, ready to acknowledge a hard worker or encourage a beginner. He had showed all the signs of becoming a good master. There were the first level when one of the men went sick, and I was obliged to engage a new laborer temporarily. I thought nothing of it when the fellow told me he had worked his way down through Italy from Milan. It was not unusual for a laborer who traveled in search of work, but there was something alarming about the quick, startled glance that the man gave Eric when they first met. Something over and above the normal surprise engendered by the prospect of working beside that mast. By siesta time, I had gathered enough from the throbbing whispering like wildfire all over signal that whenever secret Eric had chosen to hide was a secret no longer. This man had seen something, not in the Travosphere perhaps, but elsewhere, in Milan or Florence, where all the fairs be attended. And now he had told me what he knew. I had turned him off at the end of the day, but I knew it was too late to repair the damage he had done. The atmosphere on the site reminded me of the timeless lull before an electrical storm, and I could see with sudden tension in Eric's eyes. He was fully aware of the change that had come over the men. It wasn't long before the whispered word monster reached my ears, and I heard it with terrible sorrow, for it merely confirmed my own inner understanding. I had guessed long ago the boy hid some very serious deformity behind the mask, something I never found the courage to reveal to me. In many quiet little ways, I tried to show him that his fears were groundless, but he had never been ready to read those signs, and I had been forced to wait patiently for the day when he finally trusted me enough to know to show his face in the privacy of our home. Now, as I was beginning to understand the enormity of the burden he carried with him, I saw that this day was never going to dawn. Danger was pulsing all around him, like molten lava waiting to engulf him in an unguarded moment. And I watched him change in response of this unspoken threat. Suddenly he was a feral animal once again, sensing the imminent reality of the attack. A young tiger waiting in grim, threatening silence to repel the challenge that never came. His natural authority and his reputation for a quick and savage knife hand kept the threat hovering narrowly at bay, but the vigilance required of him was unremitting and began to come from the site at night too tense to even think of eating. It was in that same week that Luciana had taken upon herself to dismiss my housekeeper and take over the duties herself. "What's wrong with my cooking?" she demanded in that ominous tone when Erik had chosen yet again to go straight to the cellar without explanation or apology. "There is nothing wrong with your cooking," I said valiantly, spearfulling a strange fork full of a dish I had yet to identify. "Nothing at all." "He hasn't even bothered to come see what it is. The boy's weary, for God's sake, Luciana. He only wants to rest." As the delicate twinkling notes of the old spinet drifted between us, Luciana fist clenched upon the table. "He's not too weary to play, though, is he?" she said fiercely. "He won't be too weary to sit up all night drawing and messing around with bits of wire. Only too weary to eat a meal I spent hours making." And snatching her own untouched plate off of the table, she rushed away to slam pots and pans in the kitchen. When Luciana had gone to bed, I sat for several hours staring into the empty hearth, smoking steadily and refilling my pipe at intervals, trying to think of what to do best. Toward midnight, reaching a sudden decision, I knocked once on the door of the cellar and went down the steep stone steps without waiting for a reply. Erik had been working on the accounts. The huge leather stood open on the table behind him, lit by a wilting candle on either side, a spray of ink across the page betraying the startled haste with which he had got to his feet at my unexpected intrusion. I fancied I could almost hear his accelerated heartbeat, and it saddened me to see him returning inexorably to his instinctive distrust wariness. "I've been wanting to have a quiet word with you, Erik." Yes, sir." "I know." He turned away to close up the heavily ruled ledger. "The accounts are all up to date now. Everything's in order. I'll be packed and gone within the hour." Glancing beyond him, I saw the old saddlebags were already laid out waiting on his pallet, and I knew that I had not made the decision to come down here tonight. I know I would have found the cellar empty in the morning. "You were going to leave without a word?" I accused him indignantly. "Why?" He stared at the ledger. "Because," he said with difficulty, "because I didn't want to wait until you had asked me to." I had a sudden great desire to strike him with a smart cuff around the ear. "You foolish boy," I said testily. "Why in God's name would you think I want you to leave?" "I'm causing trouble." He would not look at me. "I ought to go now before it's too late." "I have never heard such absurd drama. You better come upstairs at once before I get really angry with you." I marched back up the steps, and he followed me in uncomfortable, meekly obedient silence, just as though he were an errant son, sat hastily where I told him to sit, and accepted the wine I gave him without further protest. I was well aware that it was going to be impossible to talk to him in the manner that I wished to talk to him while he sat there stone cold sober, wearing his tension and his habitual reserve like an impenetrable suit of armor. So for a while I discussed the business of the day and steadily refilled our large Venetian glasses, obliging him to keep pace with me. It didn't take too many glasses before I saw that his free hand was no longer clenched on his knee, but trailing limp and relaxed over the arm of his chair. I spoke of many things that night, some that I had meant to, some that I had not. I too was feeling the wine by now, and it had filled me with a morbid certainty that the opportunity would not come again, that we were all of us caught in a relentless current that might soon become too strong to swim against. The oil lamps faded and went out, one by one, but I did not trouble to replenish them as I spoke of the grand Messianic ideals, the responsibilities of manhood. I spoke of God, the grand sovereign architect of the universe, who measures all as by the square and the plumb and the compass. I spoke of goodwill and charity and tolerance, and at length, choosing my words with much as care as I could muster, I spoke of the extreme vulnerability of young women. He asked me no questions, made no comment, but he did not look away, and I knew he was listening, trying too hard to accept what must seem so much at odds with the reality of his life. I asked tolerance and forbearance in the face of cruelty and scorn, Knew it was a hard path I showed him, a daunting journey from which it would be all too easy to turn aside. He wasn't ready to accept a crucifix, and yet without some symbol of hope, something to touch to hold on to in those dark moments of despair, I feared he might soon be lost in the temptations of angry violence. In my desk lay the silver compass that Isabel had given to me in our happier days before Luciana was born. It had been in my mind to give it to him many times, but I had never found a moment in which the appropriate words could be spoken. I gave it to him now, knowing I could not afford to wait any longer, and he accepted it confused, tongue-tied embarrassment of a boy unentirely used to receiving gifts. His faltering gratitude hurt me, and it made me take refuge in a brusqueness I had not intended. Well, it's no use for me when I can hardly hold a ledge straight. Just to see where you put in a safe place, that's all, and don't go losing it. He pocketed the compass with some difficulty on his second attempt, his fingers oddly clumsy and uncoordinated with the wine. By now, I could see he was struggling to keep dutifully awake. Get off yourself to bed, boy. You're well and truly shipped, I said ruefully, watching him get unsteadily into his feet and negotiate his way with slow determination toward the stairs. I called him back. The eyes behind the mask gave vaguely in my direction. I wonder how many of me he was seeing in that moment. Erik, I hope you'll never become so good at building walls that you can't see when they need to be pulled down. He hesitated, staring at me with fuddled uncertainty. I'll see to that first thing, sir, he muttered, as though he hoped that was appropriate reply. Since there was quite clearly no point in trying to say another rational word to him tonight, I let him go before it became necessary to carry him down those stairs to bed. I went on drinking for some time after he left me, feeling that I'd made a rather miserable botch of the proceedings. What, after all, had I achieved by getting the boy so blind drunk that he could hardly stand? In the morning, he probably wouldn't remember a thing I said to him. I had little enough to cause to feel proud of my own wisdom as a father or a guardian in the months that followed either. Indeed, almost everything that happened seemed to confirm my growing impression that I was simply a foolish, rather incompetent old man who was rapidly losing grip of things and ought not to presume to give advice to anyone. Much good it was to hold the forth on the ancient Masonic values of manhood, when I was quietly, plainly incapable of controlling my daughter and maintaining order in my own household. Throughout the summer, Luciana was like a blind puppy, snapping in angry confusion at things she could neither see clearly nor understand. She lacked the language to express her infatuation, and Erik the ability to believe in its existence. There seemed to be no end to the innumerable ways in which they had managed to hurt each other. In self-defense, the boy began to work longer and longer hours at the site, using lanterns to light the scaffolding after dark. Some nights he did not come home at all. The wonderful inventions which lined the walls of his cellar began to gather dust, and the old spinet stood silent in the corner. Luciana sulked in his presence and greeted him with wounding sarcasm in return. My furious rebukes went unheeded. Erik had withdrawn so deeply into himself that it was impossible to approach him on any subject that did not pertain to work. I could not reach either of them. I could not halt the relentless spinning of the whirlpool I was sucking them ever deeper into darkness. Then one morning I went to hear their voices echoing up from the cellar. Luciana's petulant with an angry hint of tears, and Erik so instinctively defensive that had been affecting a chilling indifference bound to infuriate. What are all these things anyway? What do they do? Please leave me alone, mademoiselle. I want to know. Explain them to me. You could not possibly understand. Oh, really? Am I so very stupid then? That's not what I said. No, but it's what you meant. Or did you perhaps mean something else? Yeah, that's it. I know you're too afraid to show me these things. It's because they don't work, is it? They don't work. Everything in this cellar works. I heard the dangerous note of rage exploding in his voice, and I heard Luciana's fury rise to me in a head-on collision. "Well, this doesn't work," she cried suddenly. "Not anymore, or this, or this." My God, I thought in alarm. He'll kill her. The crash of glass and metal on the stone wall reverberated all around as I stared down in the cellar to intervene. But Erik was already rushing up, taking the steps two at a time. He pushed past me roughly without a word, and such was in his violent fury that I did not dare lay a restraining hand upon his sleeve. It was the first time he had ever treated me with discourtesy. I was stunned by the uncomfortable suspicion that he had not even recognized me. I let him flee from an urge to kill that was so real, so very nearly unforgivable, that it still pulsed around me, like a lingering scent. Then I looked down at the stupid child who remained in ignorance of the tragedy she almost provoked. She was kneeling on the floor now, staring at the remnants of her willful destruction. When I laid on